Well, we started with very few because first of all the girls couldn't afford it. We had to keep the fees very low.
I used to sometimes receipt 10 shillings. That's all the child could bring back.
By the time I came to teach in Musangari, there were more African girls. But those African girls also were from the upper class.
I know when I was with the younger children, I was very happy because they were so free and so open.
The Loreto Sisters started in 1921. There was a Bishop, James Neville, who was in charge of the apostolic region of Zanzibar. He's the one who invited the sisters.
I came to Kenya in January 1948. We came by boats out by the Red Sea. In the month of January it was very, very warm, very hot, and the boat was full of troops. We were going up somewhere, I don't know where, north, but there were hundreds of troops on it, and that didn't make it very easy, but we survived, and we arrived here in January. It took much longer than it normally should take. The boat was old. In fact, I think it was its last voyage. So we weren't allowed off at any port because I think of the troops. We had to stay on board. But with the joy when we arrived in Mombasa and saw Loreto Sister down below, that was wonderful.
So you joined the novitiate and came to Kenya when?
47, I think.
And how did you come in those days?
We came by boat.
Yeah.
And landed at Mombasa.
So where were you sent when you came first to Kenya?
I was sent to Eldoret.
Oh yeah, what was that?
It was primary and secondary school.
I've been in Kenya, in Africa, for 65 years. I came here in 1963, the beginning of the independent year. We were two provinces, Eastern Africa and South Africa, and then they said, no, we have to join because we haven't got enough people. Then the provincial was talking to me at that time, and she kept talking about Kenya, and I said, well, I think I ended up by saying, well, do you want somebody to go to Kenya? And she said, yes, I do. So she said, how do you feel about it? Well, I said, maybe it's time I moved on now out of South Africa.
We were the second group to come by plane. Betty came first, but the plane came down in the middle of the desert. I don't know why in those days we came down in Benghazi, which I think is in Libya, but it was in the middle of nowhere in North Africa, and we just got out and got in. And then I remember Nairobi, it was a starry night, and this little city looked like jewel as the plane came down, the lights. And then at midnight when we arrived here, the sisters were all out at the chapel waiting for us in wheelchairs and sticks. I mean, these women were spanning from 40, I suppose, to up to 90.
When the sisters wanted to start Loreto Namuru, they were told, there's one school already, Alliance Girls High School, and that's enough for African children. Imagine. One school is enough for African girls. So Teresa Joseph O'Sullivan, she pushed for that. You see, the colonial government set up schools, or they allowed other organizations to set up schools for the colonial children. You follow? But you see, there was segregation. It wasn't as bad as South Africa, but it was bad. There was segregation for children of Asian parents, children of the colonials, and the children of African parents. I experienced that, but it was changing when I came, you follow. But I experienced it, that Miss Gary had very few African children at that time. Valley Road, when I was there as headmistress, very few African children.
The first 5 students, I think, all ran away because it was it was so cold. But they came back, and the niece of one of them is one of our first Kenyan sisters, Sister Ephigenia Gashiri.
Sister Teresa Joseph.
Oh my goodness. She, I know very, very well. She's a great friend of mine because she was in Limuru when I arrived. She had been there since, I think she'd been there, she certainly started the secondary school, and she was a bit elderly now, she wasn't young. She had been in Dublin and was well known in Dublin. Very brilliant scientist. And anyhow, she came, I think she came to Limuru about when it was started. She always, from the time she came to Limuru, she knew that there was a great future for African girls. Up to this, they had no schools, none. She immediately saw that a boarding school was the answer, because if they were kept at home and became interstate pupils, they had to do chores at home and they wouldn't be able to give the time to their studies.
Sister Teresa Joseph was, I think you've heard, she was from a more wealthy, endowed Irish family that would have been more British oriented, but she became very national and ended up in jail in 22 in Cumann before she joined. But she was obviously a highly gifted woman. She had a great passion for the development of women.
Teresa Joseph, I think it is well known that she was very curly. Curly means bad-tempered. It doesn't matter. But I found her the same even later on. Teresa Joseph, and you know what? She was tough, but they loved her, and they all talked about her. It's amazing. They all remembered her. Teresa Joseph was a great educator, and they wanted the Africans to be educated. And they did a good job. Some of the earliest women leaders in this country were all from Limuru. My grandfather was one of the first Christians in Rirota, St. John's. When Loreto Sisters came to Limuru, 1936, the priests asked the Christians at that time to give them girls. They didn't want, they were forced. So my grandfather sent his daughter. Eventually he sent all his 5 daughters to Limuru, Loreto Limuru. You see, they were forced in the beginning and they used to run away. And my mother was the second, lot to go to Limuru, you see. So I know Limuru from the very beginning, because I would hear my mother saying what the sisters were like, Sister Veronica, Sister Dolores, Sister Teresa Joseph. They had lots of stories.
The first school that was set up was in Loreto Convent in Msongari, and it was for the children belonging to those who had settled here, but with time they started schools for African girls. And then we got Catholic Parochial, this one that now is at the Holy Family Basilica. That one was for the Coloureds, the Asians were there, and later on it was moved to St. Teresa's Eastleigh in 1952. But in 1925, Catholic Parochial started, 5 years after Msongari had started. In 1936, the sisters started a school in Loreto, Mombasa, and a school in Loreto, Limuru. Now, the school in Loreto, Limuru was purely for African girls. And sisters narrate interesting stories of how the girls reported, and the weather was harsh, but the sisters were loving and inviting, going after them. Even sometimes they could run away from school and then they go after them until they got used to the learning. And they were performing very well. They took part. It was even in the newspaper, the old newspapers, the Eastern African newspaper those days, they were playing tennis, they were playing hockey, something that was even unknown, but the sisters were coaching them in that, and they did well.
I remember I arrived at 7:30 in the dark the first night, and I needn't tell you there was no electricity, nothing like that. And the girls that were there weren't very many at that time, they all came out, of course, to meet me. And that was a wonderful experience, together with there were about 5 sisters there at the time. So that was a wonderful experience, to arrive at night and meet them. And I went on from there.
I arrived on the 13th, and the following Monday, 2 days later, I was teaching in Loreto Kenya. No orientation, okay? The classes were there waiting for me, and I was teaching both in the lower end of the secondary school, and then that would be O level, the O level, it was at that time, and also at the A level. Yeah, so I had to get my act together to be ready to teach. Yeah, I had been head teacher, you see, in Loreto Milford. Now I was simply a teacher, you know. Then the following year I was commissioned to be headmistress of Loreto Convent Valley Road Secondary School, all right? And then the following year, to my great joy, I was missioned to Loreto High School, Limuru, because I wanted to be with African students.
Well, I was in the school in Eldoret early on, right? And they were all Europeans, settlers, farmers, children. And so they were boarders, so there was a need for a boarding school, right? Because they were too far away coming and going. And so they were Europeans. Then we got 1 or 2 applied Kenyans, right? And I can still remember the name of the first one, Nancy, and she it must have been very hard for her because she was the only one until some more could apply, right? Then I remember this day a parent coming, and he had, I think, three daughters, and he was coming from Molo, and so he said, "Do you have any other Kenyans in the school?" Well, I said, "Yes, we have Nancy." and so his girls came, and then gradually they came.
Do you love our African children, Bree? Did you love them?
Oh, of course I did.
What did you find good about them?
They were very obedient, for one thing.
Yes.
And they were cooperative.
Yeah, isn't that lovely?
Yes, and they appreciated anything that was done for them, you know.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know when I was with the younger children, I was very happy because they were so free and so open, and they'd tell you everything. Daddy said this yesterday, and then Mommy would do that. You get the news for the day, and they'd write their news for the day. These little ones, you know, and but they were, you know, they were always full of energy and wanting to do something here.
And the schools were not so big as they are now. Schools are too unwieldy now, and children don't have any proper training.
So you had more personal contact? You had more personal contact?
With the children?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Goodness me.
All the time?
I love the children. I'm their mothers.
Very good.
The fathers aren't so good. Excuse me.
Well, we started with very few because, first of all, the girls couldn't afford it. We had to keep the fees very low because there were girls from poorer areas, especially from northern Kenya, Nyeri, that area. Up till this very day, they are friends of mine. And therefore, they couldn't even afford first the whatever fees we had. I can't remember figure they had to pay, but we tried to keep the fees as low as possible to give them a chance. And see, we got no grants for many years, or really I think until independence. We got no grants for salaries, for building, for anything. So we had to find the money and use the bit of fees that they gave us for that.
Loreto Lemuru was a government school, and so we had a whole subsidy. Oh no, that was there. We couldn't have run it on the 300 shillings per student, you know, and not getting it fully, you follow. We couldn't. We had a subsidy in Loreto Lemuru all the time. Yes, yeah. So we were responsible. We were accountable to the government. I was another generation. I took over from Sister Colombiere. I felt that the diet was very, very minimal. So I felt that I needed to ask the parents if they could at least give 100 shillings more per year, so that they could get some eggs. They could get. They wanted to have tea in the morning, but they could get fruit at least twice a week, and sausages one day, just to have a little treat. The parents took it, and of course the children were thrilled.
Do you know, we were very few in secondary school, and secondary schools were very few. We had Alliance, Loreto Lemuru, I don't know what else, less than 200 children doing Form 4 exam, girls. It's not like now where they have thousands. We used to cut grass, this grass, dry it, and then we got some hard material like this. They make jeans, that hard material, and we would get each one, and you make that was the mattress. So if you were not well trained at home and you cut grass with the sticks, you don't sort it well, at night of course it will be poking you. That was, no, we had great fun. And then our government, the chief, and that used to give us half the bursary. In other words, I paid 150. It was hard to get it. Some children would be sent home, but my father used to pay 150 a year, which was a lot of money.
When the girls were getting education, they could, after they finished Form 4, Form 2 by then in Loreto Lemuru, they started a teacher training college. It shows how much they believed in the liberation of girls through education, so that they were empowering their own students to become teachers.
When you joined the Loreto Sisters, were you teaching?
I was a teacher. I went to join them to Kiambu. They trained me as a teacher. And then when I was leaving, I told them I want to join new people.
Very good.
Yeah.
And where did you teach? Were you in Tanzania?
No, I had to, first of all, to become a sister.
Yes.
With all the training to go.
Yes.
And then I was given to many places, Mombasa, Tanzania. Where is this other place?
Eldoret? Valley Road?
Valley Road, Eldoret, and even somewhere in Mombasa, Tanzania.
By the time I came to teach in Musangari, there were more African girls. But those African girls also were from the upper class. We had Kenyatta's children, Kibaki, Moi, embassies. You know, Loreto was about the only, at that time, there weren't many high-class schools. So we had all these children, and we would be teaching Boyas children. We had all those upper caliber. And those children were also a bit different from me being a village girl. These were, but it was not hard teaching them. Children are children. It was, and I was very tough also. I became tough. I became tough, I absorbed it. It's not tough, it's strict.
Did you ever know Wangari Maathai?
Wangari Maathai, yes. I didn't know her when she was young at school, kind of, or that, because she was in Lemuru. But she came to a function that we had, and she was the guest of honor. And She was truly a Loreto pupil. You know, she really had a heart for Loreto.
Oh, she was so eager. She was particularly good at science, and Sister Teresa Joseph, being a scientist, helped her a lot. It was through her that she went from Limuru to some place in the States, I can't remember where, to continue her education in science.
One of the things I thought were important, one of the younger Kenyan sisters, Claire Wanjohi, who's left us, she was saying, look at the women of Kenya need help. So I found I was a good organizer. I think that's probably the good aspect of me. We looked for top people who knew something, who were good at whatever they were good at. And Wangari Maathai at that stage was famous for environment and for justice and peace. So we invited her to give a talk on environment. So she was wonderful. She was so down to earth. She was practical. She started off with Genesis, suited the sisters very well. It suited us all. Very clear, very easy to get on with. So it was from then we invited her regularly to give a talk. I think we ended up in prison for 2 days because of Wangari. There was a debt campaign. She was very interested in the debt campaign, and so were we, to get the debt, how much money is being borrowed in this country, and for who, and for what, and for where, and where does it go, and is it being used for what? Because I think people think it's free, but it's not free. So we walked, and at the end of it we were arrested. Now Wangari was saved because she stayed behind to talk to the media. There was somebody interviewing her. And I think we were arrested because we were with Wangari Maathai. So that was an interesting experience, yeah. It was very interesting, yeah.
We had an annual system of going on holidays, and we used to go, and it was a shack is all you could call it now. We had Loreto Convent, you see, in Mombasa, and you go to the convent, and we'd go out to Shelley Beach. In those days, the sisters hadn't built their house, but there was this sort of a lovely shack called Tumbwane, and we'd all tumble into it together and just stay there and have a week on the beach. And I learned to snorkel, and I learned to see the beauty of the ocean. You know, walk out to the reef, get in and see the infinity of the beauty of sea life in the pools.
After Miss Ngari, I went to Eldoret, and I was in that school for quite a number of years in teaching primary. They were boarders, and little boarders, you know, and so they had to be occupied at the weekends. At that time we had, again, to keep them occupied and not getting lonely for home, we'd do things on a Saturday evening, like sometimes we might have a video for them.
The African girls getting education, in fact, it spearheaded a lot of the progress. When you hear of the first African woman into maybe the media, into teaching, into any other form of development, more often there will be those ones who got education from the missionaries, and it will be from Loreto schools, Alliance, high schools, those, yes. The students who have passed through our school would be many, nearly 1 million, I would imagine. Many, and they are all over the world now. There is even a recent one whom we saw off going to join her daughters who are settled in Australia. She's retired herself, but she went to St. Teresa Sicily and to Catholic Parochial.
Of course, the integrity of Loreto Sisters is very high, and also their care of the student. And in those days, you see, they had I think the post of them, I think everything in those days would have gone by sea mail. So, and therefore, if anything ever got lost, they actually duplicated them and kept the duplicate of their exams. So should anything happen, they would record. Now, I consider that exceptionally insightful and far-seeing and caring of the person to a very high degree.
The sad and difficult moments for the congregation, okay, in about 10 years back, there was an accident in Msongari that was quite sad.
I think it was hard because that morning I was asked to say the prayer. I went out to wave them off. I remember some of them looked a bit sad. Mostly I felt, well, maybe they weren't with their friends. You know, schoolgirls like to be with their friends. So I just said, look, be good to each other. And, you know, it is a time for these few days now to be good to each other. And we prayed for their safety and all the rest. So I was slow saying, I was thinking, I thought twice about all prayers in future then. But yes, we got the news here in the evening time. And by accident, I knew where the deputy head was. I'd had a phone call from a friend. So I was able to ring her to come back immediately and get the list of the pupils from the school, to open the school, any other needs we had. And then we didn't realize how bad the accident was. We ran up, I said, quick, just before you go now, a few people offered to go immediately to Mero, which is about 5 hours away. So we sent blankets and flasks and things like that. We're upset and we're shocked and we don't know how to cope with this. I think some of the Kenyan sisters, the younger ones, just didn't know. They didn't say anything. You wondered, did they not know? Or I think they just couldn't know how to deal with it.
I was in Eldoret for 4 years, and Eldoret was one of those early three here, Mombasa and Eldoret, who catered for the colonial children, and later with, of course, African children. And when I went, I can't remember the exact year, but I know it was 4 years before it closed. It was a very, very good school, primary and secondary boarding. And a lot of the children used to come down from Uganda for education. You could get into the train in Kampala and land in Eldoret.
The Kenyan women that came through here or through Limuru and got scholarships overseas, I think we formed them so well that they survived a very foreign system and did very, very well and integrated, and they were able to handle cultural diversity. And because I think they had their own inner worth, I hope Loreto, finally, that's our gift to people, that they feel that they are cherished and valued because they are made by God and for God. And hopefully our education system enhances and empowers that respect for the individual and inner dignity. And that's my belief, yeah.
We are truly, truly grateful to that missionary spirit of the Irish sisters and the Irish people in general. It must have been from the faith that they had, that they felt they needed to share. If they were not generous, they could have remained Christians, but in their own country. They were generous enough to come. And even our sisters tell us how difficult it was. Those days there were no planes. By the time Colombo was coming, they came by boat. So seasickness and the collection of all that they bore for our sake. We are grateful. Only God can thank them perhaps for us.